Life is not fair. That is a statement I have once heard while being in an airport. It referred to the fact that some travelers, very few, could enjoy a VIP lounge while the rest of us, mortals, have to simply sit and wait in uncomfortable chairs. Why are we so discriminated like this? I suppose that you know the answer. You get a special VIP service by becoming a frequent flyer. Or in other words, you belong to the few 20% of the passengers that bring 80% of the revenues. Why this proportion? To answer that, we have to travel back in time to Italy in the late 1800s, where an economist whose name is Vilfredo Pareto had an interesting observation. He found through an analysis that 20% of the Italians own 80% of the land in that country, a proportion that some might argue hasn't changed that much in recent years. Surprisingly, the 80-20 proportion also holds true for other type of environments, for instance, inventories, where 20% of your items hold for 80% of the value of your total stock. In marketing and sales, 80% of your revenues come from 20% of your customers. 80% of your revenues come from 20% of your products. And also in projects, where 80% of the work is done by 20% of the people. And the list goes on and on. So this topic is about inventory management. It's an introduction to the topic, but also it's an introduction to one of the techniques, tools, based on the Pareto principle, which is called the ABC analysis. What you will learn are two goals. First, explain and understand the role of inventory. And second, to determine the prioritization of inventory items, also known as SKUs, stock keeping units, based on ABC value analysis. Okay, so let us start with the basics. What is inventory? Inventory is a stock of items which are held to meet future demand. For that reason, it is considered as a role of inventory, a buffer. Okay, so let us understand how inventory buffers fluctuations. Picture the following. We have a water tank. This is a system in which we have an input flow of materials and we have an output flow of materials. We might have some losses. This can be seen as a scrap flow. Scrap basically means the material that for whatever reason is wasted. Think about products that are defects or raw materials that due to the natural process of manufacturing are wasted in the production. Okay, so the level of this water, of this tank, is inventory, and it has a role. The higher you have the level, the more buffer. The lower buffer. And the question is, what is it buffering exactly? Well, imagine that you want to keep a constant output, but your input flow fluctuates. Sometimes that rate of flow, that input flow goes very high, sometimes it goes very low. If you don't have a buffer here in the middle, whatever fluctuation you have in this system will be translated directly to the output. But if you have a buffer, you can, even though you might have some fluctuations here in the input, your output can function very smoothly, very steadily. In fact, we can even reach to the point in which there is no input flow, and this inventory will subsidize that until a certain limit. So in the same way, inventory functions like that. What fluctuates is demand. Sometimes demand is really high, sometimes it's really low. If we have a buffer, some stock available, we can always compensate those fluctuations. So when talking about inventory, it's also important to distinguish between the different types that exist. And these are the ones you see here on the bottom. So you have raw materials that are being transformed into work in process and eventually finished goods. So raw materials are the inputs coming from suppliers. Here we have a nice picture. We have some rods of steel that eventually get transformed into screws, and eventually they become into a finished good with all the packaging and everything. So we have three types: raw materials, work in process, and finished goods. Inventory management refers to the planning and the controlling of the levels of such stock. How much stock is reasonable to hold? Of course, this is a balancing act because, as you probably know by now, holding stock is also expensive. You have to invest money in facilities, like the ones you get to see here, space, people, maybe some security guards, depending on the items that you're guarding, and even technology. So all that is just linked to managing this stock. And guess what? Your customer is not paying for anything of that. That is your problem. So you better find the best way, the optimal way to manage that stock. Okay, so there are different ways to manage stock and different systems or solutions. And I'm going to show you the overview of all of them. So first, we have to understand demand, and demand can be classified as independent demand on one side and on the other side, dependent demand. So what is independent demand? Think about finished goods, like this bicycle. Finished goods are subordinated by the forces of the market. So we rely on statistics, like forecasting techniques as to determine or estimate how many of these items will be consumed in the future. Now, dependent demand items are different. Dependent demand items are the components for the finished goods. We don't need to rely on some kind of forecast techniques. For this, we just calculate by simply doing the math. For example, if we have forecasted 100 bicycles to sell in the next month, how many wheels do we need to have? That's right, 200 wheels. If we're going to sell 100 bikes, how many frames do we need to have? That's right, 100 frames, because the relationship is 1-to-1 or 1-to-2. So as you can see, this is pure arithmetics, basically. So independent demand is subordinated to the forces of the market, whereas dependent demand is subordinated to the finished good. Let us go into the realm of independent demand. Now, we can have management systems for retailers and also for manufacturers, and they are a little bit different. For retailers, one of the techniques available is the ABC analysis, in which we can categorize by items A, B items, and C items our stock. Items A and B can be controlled by means of something called EOQ, which stands for Economic Order Quantity. Don't worry at this point, this is coming on the next module. I will explain how to calculate EOQ, but at this point, just follow me. We have this technique for A and B, and EOQ can be transformed into different variations, because we can have EOQ with quantity discounts, because hey, when you buy more to your supplier, you get better prices. EOQ with differential discounting, EOQ with safety stock, EOQ with intentional shortages. So there are different variations for this model. Category C items, we can use a control system called periodic review systems. Periodic review systems is the approach, the solution we use to control the C type of items. I will explain what is the difference between A, B, and C. This is coming very soon, okay? Now, I'm telling you all this story because the scope that we're going to see in this module is the one that you see here on this shadow. We're going to focus on ABC and more specifically ABC analysis and eventually EOQ basic. We are not going to see other type of EOQ models for manufacturing, or more systems-based solutions such as material resource planning systems, just-in-time, hybrid, MRP, and just-in-time systems. This is something beyond our scope. Okay, so now we can go forward. Okay, so the three basic questions that we are trying to answer for managing stock are: number one, what items should be stocked and in which ways? Because remember, with the VIP passengers at the airport, we don't want to treat these items equally. We want to also discriminate because we have limited resources, and we want to allocate most of the resources to those items that matters the most. That's why we want to answer to this question. The second, how much should be ordered, okay, from our suppliers? And the third question, when should that order be placed? So let us start with answering question 1. And for that we have the ABC analysis, and that was part of the introduction that I just already gave you, that is based on the Pareto 80-20 rule. The purpose, the goal, is to set priorities on effort used to manage different items. So in short, and I'm repeating here myself, we want to allocate most of the resources to the vital few items and not to the trivial many items. Again, vital few is the keyword. And we have here a chart. Usually, if you go to the internet and you Google Pareto charts, they may look a bit different than this one, but this is a typical chart used for inventory management. And in this case, we have a percentage of SKUs versus the percentage of total dollar value, so that we can see, or we want to read that, how the vital few, or the 20% of the SKUs, hold roughly here 80% of the dollar value. So once again, 20% of the SKUs hold 80% of the total value. This rectangle in blue that you see here, this is what we call the A type, or the type A products, more correctly. So that's type A. These are the most important ones. Then we have another chunk, which is between 20 and 50, roughly. I have to underline roughly. And this will be the B type, and they hold for up to 95%. And the rest, these are the trivial many. These are like 50% of the items, roughly, that hold for just 5% of the total value. Now, these proportions that you see here, be aware of the following, are not always exactly like that. The purpose of this tool is just to simply identify the vital few that accounts for the most. And sometimes these proportions can be 15-80, sometimes it can be 20% that holds 70%. It's all right. Mr. Pareto won't get angry. What matters is that you can distinguish. You can distinguish, and you can classify items so that you can apply different policies of control. That is the whole goal or purpose of the tool. Okay, so here is a small parenthesis, because I assume that you have never heard the term SKU. So SKU stands for stock keeping unit, and it's basically what you see here. It could be a number or an alphanumeric code. Yeah, and that is how companies refer to their products or raw materials. They don't just call them by the names, they use codes. And these codes, they have some logic behind. For example, this could be the code for a nail, So you see? Look, it's a simple nail, and look how long the name of this nail is. And that is because the first letter tells you the tool type, because you can have different shapes here. Then we have here a metric, and that tells you the diameter, 3.1 millimeters, that is translated to 310. R, the type, ring, the length, 90 millimeters. The galvanized finish, this layer, Here is just 8 microns, etc., etc. So with this name, we can understand exactly which product we're talking about. And every company develops their own kind of language, so to say. Okay, so coming back to the classification of the A, B, C items, we have A type. Let me just go a bit deeper. They refer to the 20 or so of high value items which account for around 80% of the total stock value. I'm going to stop here because I want to emphasize a lot these two words, 20% or so. It doesn't have to be 20%. That accounts for around 80%. It doesn't have to be 80 exactly. It can be 73, 78, 83. It's all right. Now, these are items, these are very expensive, high quality, and usually strong selling materials. And because of this importance, they have to be managed very precisely. So you want to have a strict control. So you need to have a precise order date calculation. You don't want to order too much in advance because they are too expensive. You don't want to hold them too long on your warehouse because they are too expensive. So you need to have precise order, a small on-call quantities, almost just in time basically when you need them. And then you have a close stock management monitoring system. Maybe you implement some kind of RFID chips so that you have full visibility of what you're having on stock, precisely. And of course, precise determination of the backup stock, if that is needed. So you might want to have, just in case something goes wrong and your supplier doesn't deliver these items on time, you still have some buffer still. And that is called the backup, the safety stock. Okay, so moving on. B items are kind of something in the middle between those that matters the most and those that are very trivial. So in this case, you have to decide what kind of solutions you will apply to control them. B items are the next 30% or so of medium value items, which account for around 10% of the total stock value. So these are average materials. They are important, but not so important. And because of that reason, you might want to have some backup stock. You might want to also have some kind of control, but you don't want to invest most of your money on these types, as if those would be A type. Lastly, we have the trivial many. These are the many, the mass. Now, these are low quality and weak selling materials and must be treated in accordance with that principle of work simplification and expense reduction. We don't want to invest too much time, resources, manpower in controlling that. Because of these high numbers, our focus is to simply reduce cost. And we have to come up with simplified solutions, like simplified order processing, simplified stock monitoring. Maybe it is as simple as, you know what, every month you're going to place an order. And the order is always on the same size. And, you know, the inventory will fluctuate on your warehouse up and down, but it's fine, you know. And maybe you will even run out of stock. Could also be. It's also fine. We're not so worried about that. These are C types. Okay, so if we want to apply the ABC kind of perspective on a retailer and think about this shoe store, what do you think is going to be an A type? What a B or what a C? So, I don't know, we have to imagine here entering into the store, tuk, 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 tuk. And I can imagine that A types would be maybe some kind of nice leather boots, perhaps. Maybe these ones that we see here, there will be a stock, and this is precisely controlled. And if we go to the other extreme, the C types, I don't know, maybe these will be the accessoires that we will find when we are paying. Sometimes you have some kind of insoles, for example, or rubber bands for your hair, or who knows what. This could be called C types. And because of this distinction, we would like to control them completely different. Okay, so let us apply the principle of ABC on this exercise. And this is a Booker's book bindery. Okay, so that is a triple B. type of store, and Booker's book bindery divides SKUs into 3 classes according to their dollar usage. Calculate the usage values of the following SKUs and determine which is most likely to be classified as Class A. So here we have 2 questions, calculate and determine. So there are 2 questions hidden. All right, so this is our data. And here are our SKU numbers, descriptions, quantities per year, and unit value. Maybe the first thing that you notice is that, hey, but you told me that SKU numbers are very long alphanumeric codes, and here are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7. Yeah, I know. It's just for the sake of simplicity, we only have it like this. But in real life, you will end up with these alphanumeric codes. Now you notice that attached to every single code, you have a description. So SKU number 1 is a box, 2 is a cardboard in square feet, cover stock, glue, inside covers, etc. Now here we have some kind of records because during a time period, and that was a year actually, we used 500 boxes, we used 1,800 cardboard, 10,000 cover stock, 75 gallons of glue, and so on. We also have some unit values in dollars. So every box cost $3. Every cardboard of those 18,000 costs just 2 cents, 75 cents for the cover stock. But the glue, a gallon costs 40. That's not so cheap, etc., etc. So you see the data that we receive, and now we need to classify it into A, B, and C. All right. Okay, so what is the procedure? So there are some steps. Step number 1 is to, initially, on the basis of the consumption data of the past, which we have, the period consumption of all goods is established in quantity units. Check, we have all that. It's a year, we have the units per year, and we also have the prices on that year. Number 2, then these quantities units are multiplied with their prices, okay, in order to determine the value consumption of the individual goods type. Number 3, then every goods type is classified in accordance with this value consumption. So we need to sort the data. You're going to see that how it works. And number 4, finally, that is the last step, the accumulated consumption values and percentages of the type and value related consumptions are calculated, and the goods classified by the value-based consumption in A, B, and C. So we're going to apply A, B, and C based on the criteria that I already showed you. Remember, 20% of the total value is an A, and the following 30% is a B, and the remaining is just C. Okay, so let us apply step 1 and 2. So, number 1, the period consumption of all goods established in quantity units. That's this. That was even given to us. Number 2, are multiplied with their prices. These are their prices, and this is the result. And you notice immediately the differences of annual dollar usage. For example, boxes consume $1,500, whereas cardboard just $360, but glue $3,000. Very expensive, okay? And in total, we have an $81,310. This is what we have used in money. That's the total. Okay, so let us continue. Now, number 3, every goods type is sorted in accordance with this value consumption from the highest to the lowest. This is super important. If you don't sort, and I'm going, look at my mouse here. If you don't do that, the whole thing, the whole calculation is wrong. You need to sort from the highest to the lowest. How does that look here? So, look what happened here. It is sorted from the highest to the lowest, and look how the order, the initial order that we had is shifted. So now, SKU number 7 is right on top. Why? Because it has a dollar usage of 67,000. And that is just, again, by multiplying these figures, which we have previously done. The next SKU is number 3, the cover stock, and then glue, and eventually the last, the cheapest, is the cardboard. Okay? These are only seven items. In real life, you're going to have hundreds, if not thousands of items. But okay, here we only have 7. Okay, so now we're going to perform the last step. And that is this one. We need to classify these items that we have here by A, B, and C. And remember what I told you? A type of items are the most important. And in this case, it's just one item because that single item accounts for the 83% of the total value. Okay, so then I'm going to explain that in a minute. Just hold it for a second. Then we have the following next to, which can be classified as a B. And then we have the trivial many. Those many that are very, very unimportant. Okay, so let's go back. How did we get to this 83%? Well, very simple. Remember the 60,500? Well, we just divide it by 81,000, which is the total. So 67,000 from the total is 83%. 7,500 from the total is 9.2%. 3,000 from the total is 3.7. 1,500 from the total is 1.8. And yes, I know that what you're thinking, I'm not going to read this because you don't want me to, but it's okay. So you get the idea. So these are the individual percentages, but then we have to calculate the cumulative. This is also a step in between. That means for the first remains equal, but for the second is 83 plus 9.2. This is 9.2.2%. For the third, 83 plus 9.2 plus 3.7. That is this one here. And guess what? For the next one is all this. And eventually we reach to the 100%. If you run your calculations, you can also do them in Excel. And then it goes very quickly. Just make sure that you reach to 100%. If you didn't reach to the 100%, that means that you might be having a mistake here and there. But if you reach to 99.999 something, it's also fine. Don't worry. It's just that you just cut out some decimals. So again, this is a cumulative, and this cumulative is what we use for the ABC, because we can already draw the line here and define this as an A, and then draw the line here and define those as a B and the rest as a C. Now, I'm going to explain something from real life. In real life, it might be that this line, we can also draw it here. So it's not so strict. We can always play with some argumentation why we want to consider an item A, a B, or C. Yeah, it has to do with all sort of situations of risks and other type of considerations. So at the end, the Pareto is a first cut, a first solution that eventually can be modified in accordance to our needs, and everything is fine because the goal is to just manage our inventory. So ABC works like that. And you see here a chart, and I think I have it here larger because that is the ABC chart or the Pareto chart. And this is the Pareto chart applied to this exercise. So you notice here 14% of our items contain 83% of the total value. 42.9, let me just go here, 42.9 of the items, cumulative speaking, hold for the 95.9, which is this value. So I'm going back here, 95.9% of the total value, and the rest until 100 are the remaining 5%. Well, actually 4% almost. So very, very little value and many items. And this is the ABC chart or the Pareto chart. Make sure to know how to do this. If you put this data on Excel and you have the latest Excel version, in the moment you start shading your data as to create a chart, Excel will recognize that you're trying to perhaps build a Pareto chart. and it's going to suggest that to you. When that happens, when that window pops up, you say, yes, I want to have that. And then you will get a Pareto chart that might resemble this, what we're having. Okay, so this is a cumulative line of value, and these bars represent the items. Okay, so it is important to mention that these so-called ABC curves are a bit different for different industries. And here you can see some are very kind of flat and some are very sharp. And a flat could be for retailers and very sharp for technical articles. And the reason has to do with the volume of items that a retailer is having, and volume, and of course the unit prices. So when you go to a supermarket, they have, for example, I'm just thinking in this moment, I think Edeka or Real, they're having something around 40,000 SKUs. So you need a lot of items, a lot of items, almost, let me follow this chart. It's almost like 60% of the items, more than half, accounts for 80% of the value. So it's really pulverized, yeah? So the way you might want to run this ABC might be playing with the rules of 80-20 proportions. You might want to cut it at 60%. That could be interesting, 40 and 60. That is, we can call this A-type. Now, if you go to technical articles, you have completely the opposite case. Maybe this could be MediaMarkt, for example. Some few items are so expensive that accounts for the 80% of the total value of what you're having in that store. This is what this is showing you. Look, actually it's like, strictly speaking, it's like 5%. 5% of the items account for 80% of the total. Very expensive equipment, I don't know, I cannot even imagine that, because I guess I am not a VIP type of customer for such electronics. But you see the huge differences, and because all these industries, they have different curves, they play a little bit different this rule of the 80-20. We always say 80-20, but in real life we can always play a little bit with this proportion, because our goal is not just to have the 80-20. Our goal is to discriminate by A, B, and C, because we want to treat the A-type VIP. Very important, very special, precise controls. That is our goal. Okay, so just to continue. Now you work. Okay, so what do we have here? We have a nice exercise. And guess what? Good news, this is homework, but I suppose, well, you're at home anyways, so everything is homework. So homework exercise. Calculate the usage values of the following inventory items and determine which is most likely to be classified as an A item. And here we have a list, quantities used, and values, and they are all mixed because you need to sort this out. So why don't you just try to do that either by hand or with Excel? Why not? It would be great if you can also do it with Excel. And then you let me know what your results are. You can send me a message. If that is what you want, you can post your results. Perhaps some other students will copy them. Who cares? What is important is that you master this technique. And believe me, ABC analysis is very powerful because it's very simple to do and you can apply it on so many fields. This is just inventory management, but you can apply it for cost cutting, for marketing, for HR. If you are curious to know how to do this, just ask me and I can tell you tons of examples of that. Once again, thanks a lot, and till the next time, bye bye.